Hi, John McElroy here talking all things automotive, and today I want to talk about Trump's tariffs. Everyone's talking about Trump's tariffs as if this is some kind of crazy idea that the president dreamed up on his own. And while it might be crazy, it's actually part of a much larger plan based on an economic theory that most people are not aware of, and it's all about restructuring the global trading system. Trump is basing his whole plan on the ideas of an economist named Stephen Miran, who published a paper last November called A User's Guide to Restructuring the Global Trading System. You can find it online, and I highly recommend reading it. It can get pretty thick and goes deep into the weeds at times, but even if you just scan it, you'll get the idea of what it's about. And if you want to know where Trump is going with tariffs, here's your roadmap. So here's my summary of what Stephen Miran is saying, or at least how I understand it. Miran points out that the US dollar is the currency reserve for the entire world. For example, all oil sales are conducted in dollars. The dollar is a safe haven, and when times are bad, countries, companies, and people want to put their money in US dollars because it's always been so stable. Countries with big trade surpluses with the U.S. buy treasury bonds and bills because they don't want to exchange those dollar surpluses into their own currency, because that will drive up the value of their currency and make their exports less competitive. So put it all together, and we're at the point where there are more dollars used outside of the United States than in the American economy itself. For example, 60% of all U.S. cash is actually used outside of the U.S. For $100 bills, it's 80% are used outside of the U.S. That's why Stephen Miran calls it the world's reserve currency. And because the dollar is in so much demand, Miran says it is consistently overvalued. And because of that, American products are not competitive versus products that are made using currencies that are weaker. He says this is a key reason why the U.S. manufacturing sector has been gutted. Back after World War II, when the dollar became the world's reserve currency, it really didn't matter. The U.S. was so powerful, and the rest of the world was struggling to recover from the war, so the global demand for the dollar did not have much impact on U.S. exports. The U.S. also opened up its markets by implementing the lowest tariffs in the world to help those countries rebuild their economies. Miran says the balance started to swing the other way in the 1970s, when Japan and Europe started to fully recover from the war. And now he believes the strong dollar and low tariffs put American manufacturers at a distinct disadvantage. He says the U.S. has lost millions of manufacturing jobs because of this. Even when the U.S. goes into a recession, the dollar stays strong because there's so much demand for it. Instead of weakening during a recession, as most other currencies do, which helps those countries export their way out of a recession, the dollar always stays strong. And when the crap really hits the fan globally, there's a run to the safe haven of the American dollar. Miran's solution is to put higher tariffs on imported products. That doesn't make U.S. products more competitive overseas, but it does make them more competitive in the U.S. Tariffs also encourage companies to move more manufacturing to the U.S. Miran justifies this by saying the U.S. incurs a cost to having the dollar as the world's reserve currency. So it should get other countries that use the dollar and trade with the U.S. to shoulder some of that cost. And they should do that for paying for the privilege to access the U.S. market through higher tariffs. Interestingly, Miran doesn't argue to drop the dollar as the world's reserve currency. He points out that it gives the U.S. enormous influence and power in world finance, such as the ability to put crippling economic sanctions on countries like Iran and Russia without having to resort to military means. He wants to see the dollar continue as the reserve currency, but he wants other countries to help pay for the cost of maintaining it as such. Miran also argues that as tariffs make other countries less competitive in the U.S. market, the value of their currencies will go down. And when that happens, American producers will be able to buy their products for the same dollar amount, essentially wiping out the cost of the tariffs. Miran says this kind of happened during Trump's first term, when he imposed tariffs on Chinese goods by nearly 18%. The Chinese yuan devalued by 13.7%, so the effective cost to consumers in the U.S. was about a 4% rise, not 18%. But even Miran admits that just because the U.S. raises tariffs doesn't mean that other currencies will devalue. And if they do not devalue, then American consumers will be paying higher prices. He argues that this can be offset with significant tax cuts for U.S. taxpayers, along with deregulation that will make American companies more efficient and productive. But he also admits that as more companies move manufacturing to the U.S. to avoid paying tariffs, then the U.S. will collect less money in tariffs, which means that foreign countries will not be paying their fair share of using the dollar as a reserve currency. Miran's paper also warns that if other countries fight back against the U.S. with tariffs of their own, it's going to offset a lot of the benefits that he's promoting. Moreover, in his paper published last November, Miran warned that sudden tariff shocks could cause extreme volatility in global financial markets. He advocated for gradual implementation of tariffs, not imposing them in one fell swoop. Clearly, President Trump ignored that part of his advice. And this is where I think that maybe Trump did not play his hand well. Instead of explaining the economic reasons for taking his actions, which are actually quite rational, Trump went on the offensive. He went for the jugular, attacking virtually every country in the world. Now, maybe that plays well to his base, but right now our neighbors hate us. Our allies don't trust us. The markets are tanking. There's a really good chance we're headed into a recession, and our enemies are elated. But this story is far from over. Miran says that tariffs are really a tool that Trump will use to negotiate for other things that he wants, such as pressuring China to reform its economic system and not rely on its mercantilist policies that are designed to benefit China while they damage every other economy. There are other things he's arguing for too, such as a complete restructuring of the global trading system, but I'll let you read about that. I think this paper is fascinating because it lays out why Trump is doing what he's doing and where he's going to take it in the future. You don't have to like what Miran is saying, and you don't have to agree with him. And this video is definitely not an endorsement of Miran's economic philosophy. But I think it's important for you to know about it and understand what it's about, because it's going to have such a dramatic impact on the auto industry and even the global economy. By the way, I need your support. If you like me doing videos like this, would you please consider getting a Patreon or YouTube membership? You can find a link in the description of this video. It only involves a few dollars a month, and if enough of you follow through, Autoline's going to be in a good position to continue our good work. So thanks a lot, and keep a lookout for the next video.